Hello everybody, this is Jeremy Bolam, Assistant Director here at Lincoln Parish Library, welcoming you to this month's DIY Takeout Craft. This month we're taking portraits, either of your family or your favorite author, and turning them into art. I'm calling it an upcycled silhouette. Here's one of Edgar Allan Poe. That's the one we'll be doing in just a minute. And I also wanted to show you another one that I did where I say you can take your favorite person and also turn it into a work of art. So hang in coming up right now and we'll get started on our project. In your craft kit this month, you will have a set of instructions on 11 by 17 paper, front and back, a glue stick, a coupon for 10 free black and white copies of the image that you decide to use to create your silhouette portrait this month. Just bring your image and this coupon to one of the people at the information desk and they'll be happy to help you get your 10 free copies made that you'll need to create your portrait. And then you'll have a stack of varying kinds of paper. I've got some scraps in various colors and textures. I've got some magazine pages of differing colors and textures. And I've also got some 12 by 12 scrapbook paper in a couple of different colors and textures as well. What you're going to need from home is either a pencil or a fine tip permanent marker. Depending on what kind of paper you're using, you may need both of them so that you can outline the pieces that you're going to create in a little bit. And then you're going to need something to cut out the pieces of your image. And I recommend smaller scissors than this because you're going to need some kind of scissors that are good enough to do small detail. Some of the pieces that you're going to cut today are going to be quite detailed. Well, it depends on your image, but the ones in mine are going to be quite detailed. I'm going to prefer to use a craft knife or X-Acto knife. And if you use one of these, I also recommend that you have a cutting mat on hand as well to do that. To get started, you're going to choose the image that you'd like to use to create your silhouette. And I'm going to show you today the exact picture here that I used for the instruction kit, which is this image of Edgar Allan Poe with a raven next to him. So the first thing you're going to want to do once you identify the image that you want is grab your coupon voucher to come to the library and make some black and white copies that you can then use to cut out the different pieces of the image to create the silhouette using the different kinds of pieces of paper. This isn't what you would call a traditional silhouette. I guess you can call it a multi-piece silhouette because usually silhouettes are all one color, but we're doing a multicolor silhouette. The next thing you're going to do with your image, and you may want to start with your colored image again for this part, is to identify the main parts of your image that make it identifiable or unique so that when you cut it into pieces and then put it back together in differing pieces of paper, that it still looks like the image. So for this picture of Edgar Allan Poe, that would be probably the crow, of course his face, and he does have a mustache almost all the time and a very heavy brow. So I'm going to say the mustache and the eyebrows also identify him, and his hair. And then I'm going to do the collar. He also has a cravat here, which I'm going to have to kind of imagine a little bit because this is from a book cover, so there's some wording here. And then the two jacket lapels on either side. I could put in the church and the tree if I wanted to, but I'm going to leave that off this time, and I'm just going to put it on a plain background. So once you have each of those portions identified, you're going to go to the copies of your black and white images and then cut each one of those out. I want to give you a hint right up. Some portions of your image you may want to cut a little larger than they are because putting this together as an exact jigsaw puzzle after cutting by hand all of these pieces is quite difficult to do. So you have to kind of have an artsy way of putting this together. So take, for example, his face. You probably don't want to cut exactly on the line of the hair and then go back and try to cut the hair out right next to that one. you probably want to cut the face a little bit larger and then cut the hair as is and then set the hair on top of the face so that it fits properly. I've also got this overlapping beak of the crow, and there's an ear back there. So you also probably, this is one of those things where you're going to want to fill in what you think is there to kind of to finish out the picture that you have. Now, a detail like an ear, you may want to cut exactly close to it so that the hair kind of goes behind it. There would be a different place that you would then cut the hair a little bit differently. You just have to think about and plan all of your layers. So I've got the hair, the face, the crow, the eyebrows and the mustache, the collar, the cravat, which I said is going to take some imagination, and the jacket, both lapels of the jacket. I'm also going to go ahead and fill out the rest of this crow as it goes down, just so that I have more than I need, depending on what kind of background I decide to take. And he's probably got a head that does this, and then usually an arc back. And then on a different copy, you probably would want to finish out the jacket, shoulders, because it doesn't hurt to have pieces that are a little bit bigger than your image that can always overlap, and you can adjust them later when you cut your final presentation piece. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting out all of these pieces, and I will be back momentarily. Okay, I finished cutting out all of my pieces. So as you can see, I've got the coat, the cravat, the collar, Edgar Allan Poe's face, his crow, his hair, his eyebrows, and his mustache. I didn't include all of the pieces being cut in the time-lapse photo, but as you can see, the detail of the hair, which is why I say using small scissors or an X-Acto knife is good. It also gets some of the nuanced curving that you can't always get with scissors if you use a craft knife as well. So the next step is to identify from the pieces of paper that you have for each component what kind of coloring and paper you want to use. So I'm going to group all of mine together. The coat will have something similar because it's one component. The collar is one, the cravat is another. We've got his face, the hair, and the eyebrows and the mustache. Since they're all hair, they probably should be the same kind of paper. And then the crow would be his own. And then of course we have to choose a background piece. So I'm gonna pull in my color just as reference so that I can see it, just so I can see the picture as a whole. And I'm going to look through my paper that I got in my kit. Oh, and that one's actually a face. I don't know if you can see because there is kind of a glare. So maybe that one would fit the face, and it will, but since there's actually a face on there, I think it might be a little better to do it upside down so you can't exactly see the face as a face. So I'm going to go with that for my face paper. This is textile, so that actually, and it's white like the the collar. So I'm gonna go ahead and use that for my collar piece. The cravat could be a fun color. I'm gonna go ahead and use this for my cravat. And funny that this piece is a raven, but I don't think the raven's gonna fit on there. But I think I'm going to use that for his coat, and I think I could probably make that fit if I'm creative enough to get that to fit on there, to use that for his coat. And this is black, and you know, sometimes when black feathers shine, they kind of have a purple hue to it, so let's maybe use this for the crow. Will he fit? Almost exactly so. He fits right there. So I think I'm going to use that for the crow. And what I've got left is the hair. Let's see what my scrap pieces are kind of small for all that. Amazingly, I have this cool spider web paper that I can use for his hair. So I'm going to use that for Mr. Poe's hair. And then the background, I've got 3 pieces of scrapbook paper left. So I think once I start cutting, I'll probably make that decision if you have several pieces, or if you have your own paper or a piece of wrapping paper at home, or even a piece of newspaper or plain cardboard. You can use whatever you like that sets off your portrait the best. So I'll make that decision as I go along. So your next step is going to be to take each one of your components that you've cut out and then to trace it onto your paper. For something like this, which is an overall pattern, you can take your pieces and turn the paper over and then trace them on this way with a pencil, which is the good, easy way to do this. With something like this, where it's one-sided and very exact, this is where your permanent marker would come into play, and a lot of patience to get very close, because this is thin copy paper, to then outline this piece and then cut it out later. So I'm going to go ahead and outline all these pieces and then get ready to cut. All right, now that I have everything traced out, I've got his hair on the black spiderweb paper, the crow on this antique chest. I've got the coat on this blue bird-like thing, the cravat here, the face on this face. We'll see how that ends up working out, because it's kind of dark over here. I may end up changing my mind, who knows. And then the collar on this white fabric-looking thing. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these out, and then I'll be back and show you how to put it all together. I will give a hint though that you'll probably see me during the time lapse testing to see how they kind of fit together, to make sure that I've got everything close to what it needs to be, because it helps to assemble your picture as you go along to see that you cut one piece too small, too big, so that you can actually get it layered correctly. So in case you see that happening, that's what's going on, and I will mention it when I get back. All the pieces cut, you can see that I switched out the look of the face. I had a concern with how dark this corner was with the hair. It might have worked, but it was bugging me a little bit too much, so I went ahead and went with a more neutral color for the face. I think that stands out a lot better. Now here's where the tricky part comes in. It's trying to get all the layers so that they line up correctly. Notice he has an ear there that I'm supposed to be lining up with the rest of his hair. This side works fine, but for me to get this one to do, I'm gonna have to create an incision here so that I can slide that paper behind, just so that there's enough of it there to get the hair and the ear in the right place. I just cut a straight line here. And you don't have to really worry about that, because look, the beak of the crow is going to cover that line. So this works out beautifully for that kind of reason. And this one, with the way that the bump is made, it actually kind of takes care of itself. But this one did not, which is why I need the little crease to put it in there. And again, it will correct itself. If you get the right side, actually that's my left, but the right side of Poe lined up correctly, that looks pretty good with this hair there. And then next would be his collar, which is pretty much right at the hairline. And then the cravat and if you noticed, I overcorrected some of my tracing when I was cutting because I remembered that the cravat especially needed to be a little bit extra large because of the way that this thing ends up lining up. And then the coat as such. And again, don't worry about these pieces being too long because once you glue them in place on your paper, you can then trim them. So the coat, which needs to be straight, and if you look on it's a little bit down, but I think that's looking really good. And then, of course, the crow here, sitting on his shoulder and coming across his cheek like that. Last three things here are the mustache and the eyebrows. And we can get those positioned a little bit better as we glue. So I think I'm happy with all of my pieces. Now I need to decide on a background and then get gluing. All right, I've decided on my background. I'm gonna go with this more burgundy color. It kind of reminds me of his cravat in this picture. And one of the good things about it is it kind of looks like old-timey wallpaper. So Mr. Poe would feel right at home in such a background. And it makes everything stand out nicely, which is the good part about that. The hair, you can see the hair good. You can see the flesh tone, excellent, makes the flesh tone stand out. Let's see how the cravat looks on it. It's a little red, but I think once the suit is put back to it, it'll still stand out enough and also highlight the red and the colors in a different place. And the same thing with the crow, is black enough and different enough to do the same thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and start gluing all these pieces into place, and I will be back at the end to explain how you can finish up. So you can see after I glued everything that it's a little rough, especially around the bottom. I've got some lines that aren't exactly straight here, and the bird cuts off. So to finish the picture out, basically you're gonna use this edge as a guide. Well, actually probably the bottom is where we need to find a straight line on the bottom first to cut. And then I will measure the height. Let me grab my trusty ruler and see about what that is. It should be about 9-10 inches or so. I think I'm gonna do 10 by 10, just so that'll be a little bit better. And the crow isn't really that much in the picture. And remember, I drew a little bit extra on him when I cut him out. And actually, in this one, he comes almost here. So I think the 10 by 10 will be fine. And I'm gonna cheat and use a paper cutter, and I'm gonna do that, and I will show you my finished project. So here is my finished portrait of Edgar Allan Poe. I think he looks pretty good. Here's the original, and here is what I created using the magazine pieces and the scrapbooking pieces. I'm glad that I never have a plan when I craft, because it's always, you never know how it's going to end up. I thought it was going to be a 10 by 10. It ended up being an 8 by 10. So he is ready for framing just like a regular portrait. I think he'll make a nice addition to some Halloween decor later on this year. Thanks for joining me. I want to let you know what next month we're going to be doing. For August, we're going to be making paper bags, and that will take place on August the 23rd is when these kits will come out. You'll get a kit with glue and with pieces of paper and instructions on how to make a paper bag for any occasion. You can make them for lunch, for your kiddos as they go back to school, or for gift bags, or to carry your own lunch to work and be the talk of the table. So that's next month. This is Jeremy Bolam, Assistant Director. I appreciate you joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed your craft. See you next time.